Welcome to the debate. So, we've all seen the imagery online, right? A smooth slab of oak, a single minimalist lamp.
Right. One notebook, 0 wires.
Exactly. It's constantly presented to us as the ultimate, indispensable architecture for deep thought.
Yeah, the whole productivity aesthetic. And it carries this very specific unspoken promise. Like if you just buy the right organizational boxes and, hide your cables, your mind will miraculously follow suit and become perfectly organized.
Right, which brings us to a really fascinating collision between modern hustle culture and ancient philosophy. Because when you step into the world of classical texts on mental discipline, that perfectly clear desk suddenly becomes a battleground for a much deeper question.
It really does.
Today, we are looking at the interpretation of dhyana yoga from the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Specifically, we're focusing on the contemporary applications of shlokas 6.10 and 6.11.
And just to ground that for anyone listening, dhyana yoga in this context isn't about, physical stretching or the postures you might see in a modern studio.
No, definitely not.
We are talking about the classical path of profound cognitive absorption. It is the rigorous discipline of meditation and mastering the mechanics of human attention.
Exactly. And these specific verses outline the practical steps to achieve that state of inner stillness. But they present a profound tension when applied to modern life. We really want to figure out, does achieving true mental clarity require the active, almost aggressive curation of our external environment?
Or does genuine discipline demand an internal mastery that just renders our physical and digital surroundings completely irrelevant?
Right. And I'll be arguing that, based on the text's modern guidelines, external curation, physical minimalism, intentional digital disconnection, is the absolute foundational prerequisite for internal stillness. You simply cannot build a tranquil mind on a chaotic foundation.
And I read the same text and see a completely different ultimate goal. I argue that overemphasizing environmental design completely misinterprets the fundamental aim of dhyana yoga. True solitude and true non-possessiveness must be cultivated internally, independently of external conditions. If your peace of mind shatters just because someone sends you a text message or, there's laundry on your chair, you haven't achieved stillness. You have only achieved insulation.
Okay, let's start with the physical foundation, because the text is incredibly specific here. Shloka 6.11 gives a very clear instruction. It says, the practitioner must establish a firm seat in a clean place.
Right, the kusha grass and the deerskin.
Exactly. In ancient times, this meant a seat covered sequentially with sacred kusha grass, a deerskin, and a cloth, placed neither too high nor too low. And when we translate that to contemporary life, the equivalent is curating a dedicated space free from physical clutter. The mechanism at play here is cognitive load.
Wait, but are we taking a highly pragmatic ancient survival instruction and turning it into a modern excuse for procrastination?
Procrastination? How is cleaning your desk an excuse?
Well, look at the historical reality of the kusha grass and the deerskin. It was to insulate the body against damp ground, right? To physically repel insects in a forest. It was basic survival.
Sure. Today, we aren't warding off scorpions. We are dealing with papers on a desk. So is there a danger that modern environmental design just becomes a form of procrastination? Waiting for the perfect space to engage in deep work is exactly the kind of mental friction the text wants us to eliminate.
The thread has changed, definitely, but the neurobiology hasn't. You are suggesting that letting the physical environment dictate our readiness is somehow a lack of discipline. But let's look at why the text insists the seat be firm and neither too high nor too low.
Okay, why?
This translates directly to proprioception and nervous system regulation. Think about the last time you tried to solve a complex problem while sitting on a wobbly chair.
Yeah, it's annoying.
Right, because your brain is subconsciously allocating processing power to keeping your balance. It is a constant low-grade drain on your central nervous system. I don't disagree that physical comfort aids focus, but you are conflating a wobbly chair with a cluttered room. They aren't the same thing.
They function the exact same way in the brain, though. If your space is cluttered, Your visual cortex is constantly processing that visual noise. It triggers what psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect.
The constant reminder of incomplete tasks.
Exactly. Your brain is continually reminded, I need to file that paper, I need to wash that cup. The text recognized this thousands of years ago. Creating a clean, dedicated space isn't an excuse to avoid work. It is the act of removing literal, biological roadblocks to mental clarity. You have to stabilize the physical foundation before your brain will allow you to tackle major emotional or intellectual challenges.
Let me push back on that assumption, though. Think about the mental friction the text ultimately seeks to eliminate. If you believe you absolutely must establish this pristine, perfectly curated, firm seat before you can engage in deep work, you have just created a massive barrier to entry.
How so? If the space takes 5 minutes to clean, you are simply preparing the instrument.
Because it creates a fragile state of mind. It's like relying on a sensory deprivation tank to fall asleep.
Oh, wow. That's a bit extreme, isn't it?
No, think about it. Yes, the tank works perfectly. It removes all external stimuli, your visual cortex powers down, your proprioception stabilizes, and you drift off. But what happens when you have to sleep in a normal bed? You adjust. Or what if you're in a hotel room with a humming air conditioner? You've destroyed your natural ability to sleep in the real world. If a person requires a perfectly clean space to think deeply, they haven't mastered their mind. They have just engineered a highly controlled bubble. True mental control means the ability to drop into that state of focus, regardless of whether the metaphorical seat is perfectly aligned or covered in yesterday's mail.
That implies human willpower is infinite, which completely ignores the explicit reality of our modern ecosystem. But okay, let's follow your logic. What happens when you do perfectly curate that physical room? You sit down, the desk is clear, the chair is firm, and then your pocket buzzes.
Ah, the smartphone.
Right. That physical sanctuary is instantly shattered, which forces us to look at the next layer of the text. Moving from the physical space we sit in, we have to look at the digital space that occupies our minds. Shloka 6.10 directs the practitioner to remain in solitude.
Right. The Sanskrit phrase is rahasi stita, remaining in solitude. And the contemporary guide to this text equates this with turning off the phone and stepping away from the endless stream of digital content.
Which makes perfect sense.
But it frames solitude as geographical or technological isolation. I find that to be a fundamentally superficial reading of what solitude means in the context of dhyana yoga.
Superficial? Giving your brain a break from the internet is superficial.
Defining rahasi stita merely as putting the phone in airplane mode lowers the bar of what the Gita is asking of us. True solitude is an internal fortress. It means being completely alone with one's mind, even amidst the noise.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on human fallibility.
Go ahead.
We aren't talking about casually ignoring a noisy subway car. The human brain did not evolve to withstand the psychological engineering of a modern smartphone. A notification ping isn't just noise. It is specifically designed by engineers to hijack the dopamine system and trigger the orienting reflex.
So we just retreat, we admit defeat to an algorithm?
We act with pragmatic humility. You are demanding an internal fortress, but you have to recognize that the modern digital stream is an active, targeted assault on the walls of that fortress. Relying on pure internal willpower to ignore a buzzing phone on your desk is biologically unrealistic for the vast majority of human beings.
Which is exactly where the practice of jhana yoga happens.
But why burn the energy there? Intentional physical disconnection isn't lowering the bar. You cannot reset a nervous system while it is actively being flooded with inputs designed to dysregulate it. Intentionally stepping away, leaving the phone in another room, is the highest form of discipline because it requires the self-awareness to say, my willpower is finite, I must architect my environment to protect my attention.
The critical flaw in relying on the power button of a phone is that your so-called solitude ends the exact millisecond the device turns back on. If your state of inner stillness is entirely contingent on the Wi-Fi router being unplugged, then the technology still completely controls you. You have just found a temporary hiding place.
It is a boundary, not a hiding place.
A boundary implies you are still dealing with the threat. Hiding means you removed it completely, and therefore you never build immunity. If we go back to shloka 6.10, the goal is a carefully controlled mind and body.
Right.
The highest expression of that is to observe the buzzing phone, to viscerally feel the biological urge to check it, to watch your orienting reflex flare up, and to have the internal mastery to let that urge pass without action. That is what it means to be completely alone in the modern world. Anything less is just training yourself to depend on a sterile environment.
But let's look at the actual mechanism of that urge you just described. Why is it so hard to let that urge pass?
It's because of the attachment we have to the information, the status, and the objects on the other side of that screen.
Which transitions us perfectly to the second half of shloka 6.10.
Exactly. It addresses aparigraha, or non-possessiveness, the instruction to be free from endless desires and the urge to hoard possessions.
Right. We have talked about the physical space we inhabit and the digital noise we allow in. But the deepest layer is our relationship to the objects and status symbols within those spaces. The contemporary guide positions aparigraha as the ultimate antidote to modern consumer culture. And the psychological mechanism here is profound. We often end up feeling owned by the things we own.
Right. The maintenance of possessions becomes its own cognitive tax.
Exactly. Every single object you possess requires physical space, financial maintenance, and mental bandwidth. By consciously practicing physical minimalism, actively buying less, aggressively decluttering, you are systematically removing massive amounts of anxiety and decision fatigue from your daily routine. Minimalism, in this context, is the practical, physical manifestation of aparigraha. It is how we sever the cycle of endless desires.
I look at modern minimalism and see a profound irony that actually contradicts aparigraha. Let me explain how the brain's reward system can deceive us here.
Sure.
You argue that aggressive decluttering severs desire. But have you considered that modern minimalism can just become another form of social status and hoarding?
Wait, hoarding? You are saying people get a dopamine hit from throwing things away? Absolutely.
Purging gives a massive, immediate illusion of control. When you are stressed, taking a trash bag full of clothes to a donation center provides a sudden rush of agency. But if the internal state hasn't changed, the mind immediately looks to fill that newly emptied space. You haven't severed the desire. You have just swapped the addiction to buying for an addiction to purging.
That seems like an edge case of obsessive behavior, not the standard practice of minimalism.
Not in today's culture. Think about the perfectly austere, hyper-curated space you mentioned at the top of the show. For many, that minimalist aesthetic is an immense status symbol in itself.
I mean, maybe.
Actually requires significant wealth to own perfectly curated, high-quality, multi-purpose items that allow a room to look that empty.
The contemporary guide warns against the need to constantly chase social status, but modern minimalism has simply commodified empty space as the new luxury.
That is a critique of a specific Instagram aesthetic, not the underlying philosophy.
But the mechanism of attachment is identical. If you are obsessed with decluttering, if you are spending your weekend evaluating every single object in your house to see if it sparks joy, your mind is still entirely enslaved by the concept of possessions. You are just as attached to your perfectly empty desk as a hoarder is to a pile of newspapers.
I see the logic there, but it misses the practical reality for the average person. When the text advises freeing oneself from the urge to hoard, it is directly addressing the modern cognitive load of endless choices.
Okay, but yes, minimalism can be commodified into a status symbol. But for someone navigating a culture that demands they buy something new every single day, the conscious choice to simply own less is a highly effective step toward mental freedom. Simplifying the external frees up baseline energy for the immense challenge of deep cognitive absorption.
And I maintain that true freedom from the urge to hoard is an internal state of non-attachment, not the external action of emptying a room. Let me give you an example.
Okay, go for it.
Imagine a person living in a completely barren minimalist apartment who is agonizing over the tiny scuff mark on their hardwood floor. completely tormented by the desire to maintain perfection.
Right.
Now, imagine someone living in a bustling, cluttered, vibrant household with kids and pets who is entirely indifferent to the objects around them, perfectly content to have them, perfectly fine if they break.
Well, the latter embodies true aparigraha. I'll give you that.
Exactly. It is the internal detachment from the very concept of ownership, regardless of what physically surrounds you. Throwing things away is just changing the scenery. Non-possessiveness is changing the lens through which you view reality.
But if it is purely an internal exercise, why does the Bhagavad Gita bother to mention the clean place, the firm seat, and the kusha brass at all? If the physical environment didn't matter, shloka 6.11 wouldn't exist. The authors explicitly acknowledge that the physical environment is the necessary entry point for human beings.
They acknowledged it as a starting point for beginners, not the ultimate state of existence.
But we are all beginners in the face of modern consumerism and digital engineering. That is my core argument. The translation of these ancient texts into contemporary guides offers us deeply pragmatic tools, not just lofty, unattainable ideals. We live in a world that is actively engineered to distract us, to sell to us, and to continuously disrupt our physical and mental equilibrium. Recognizing that reality and acting upon it through aggressive environmental design and intentional disconnection is the very definition of discipline.
And my stance remains rooted in intellectual precision regarding the text's ultimate aim. While curating a clean space or silencing a phone is undeniably helpful in the short term, it is vital that we do not confuse external symptom management with the true goal.
Which is?
An invincible internal sanctuary. A carefully controlled mind, unbothered by endless desires, digital notifications, or physical discomfort, must eventually be capable of sustaining itself regardless of the surrounding environment. If your peace relies entirely on the kusha grass or the noise-canceling headphones and the airplane mode, it is a conditional peace, and conditional peace is easily broken.
I think where we fundamentally converge, despite these differing approaches, is on the sheer magnitude of the task. Finding genuine inner stillness in a hyper-connected, relentlessly consumer-driven modern world is an immense challenge. It is fascinating that a text from thousands of years ago diagnosing the restless nature of the human mind feels as though it could have been written yesterday.
It proves that human neurobiology and the struggles of attention haven't fundamentally changed. Even if the tools of distraction have evolved, the text invites anyone listening to constantly evaluate their own dependencies. Am I clearing this desk to focus, or am I clearing this desk to avoid the discomfort of focusing?
Yeah, that's a tough question.
Right. Am I putting my phone away because I want solitude, or because I am afraid of what I will feel when it rings? There is so much depth in this material for anyone willing to look honestly at the mechanisms driving their own habits.
Which brings us right back to that opening image of the perfectly clear desk. Is it the essential biological foundation for profound inner stillness, or is it just another beautiful, silent distraction preventing us from doing the real internal work? We leave that for you to decide. Until next time.